Hi, welcome to Comic Talk. I'm Joshua.
And I'm Drew.
And this is a Talks Comics episode where we talk about creators and fans and the relationship between them.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so this is attempt number 2 at this video. We told you it was coming to you a couple weeks ago. We shot it, we did it, and then it disappeared.
Yeah, it was a thing and then it wasn't a thing. So
Yeah.
now we have to make another thing that was the same thing. We released that instead of the one thing.
So hopefully this will be better than the last one that you didn't see. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
We'll find out. So I think the first thing we should talk about here, if we're talking about creators and fans, is we should just try to give
Context?
a general context of what it is that we're trying to get at here. So how would you describe what it is we're doing here today?
I guess the effect that fans have on not only what comes out, but also like maybe the direction a series will take. Really all aspects of the marketplace when it comes down to it.
Right, because we're in an age now, right, where so much feedback occurs. It's no longer, just a bag of reader mail that shows up and is or is not read, and if you get in the back, and it can mostly be ignored because the only people that see it are the people they want to see it, right?
Sure, not only that, but I don't think I've ever felt strongly enough about a comic that I wrote a letter about it, but
Yeah.
I've angry posted on Twitter several times.
Right.
So one is just inherently easier, so you're going to get more feedback.
So there's more of it, right?
And like you were saying, everybody can see it. So
And it's cyclical because people can then respond to the responses, and it creates entire waves of conversation and sort of cultural memes that happen, right? So let's start off with the most obvious thing regarding like creative content and the fandom's effect on that, and that is just sales, right? So I mean it's obvious, or I mean it seems obvious to me, right, that the main thing, the most important thing that a fan can do to really affect what's being made is by buying stuff, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's why we have like 17 Batman titles, and 17 like Avengers titles, because the Avengers sells really well.
Right. Right. And I guess that does create kind of a funny loop, though, where when people, and this is how it works for the large majority of consumers, when they purchase based on like the character that's on the thing, which we've talked about characters and creators previously, but when this starts to happen, then obviously people like Marvel and DC, which is the main places where really this happens the most, just because of name recognition.
Yeah.
If everybody's buying Batman, then more Batman gets made. But not just the book that says Batman. Then we get, the book that says Detective Comics. And we get, All-Star Batman. And we start getting all these different Batman books. And so people keep buying them because they're popular. So you hear about Batman, and then more people buy Batman. But as more Batman books get made, the quality goes down and down, right? So then you have lots of bad stuff.
It also causes like a segmentation within those characters, because, say you have this Batman that's for like this age group, and this one that's like for this age group, and this one's like a throwback, so it's probably going to get like some really old people or just some younger, nostalgic for a period in which they were never alive people. But within that, I mean, you have to imagine if there was one title, it would really incorporate most of that and be kind of a shining example of most of that. But then because it's segmented out, you just get watered down versions of each of those.
Right. But I think that oversaturation that we see is a really good illustration of where the market kind of fails for critical readers, people who are interested in quality work. A really good illustration of it, I think, is what happens at Marvel over and over again. Wolverine was an example previously. Deadpool is currently a bit of an example. Harley Quinn over at DC is kind of an example of this, where more and more of it gets made, and then people tire of it, and then they don't want it anymore. Or X-Men is a great example, right? X-Men is kind of fallen apart, and there's tons of X-Men stuff even now, but yet we constantly get these comments and people saying things like Marvel's killing the X-Men. They're trying to get rid of the X-Men, even though there's like tons of X-Men books. Like half of the Marvel line is X-Men titles or X-Men related characters, right? But there's still this like meme in the like comic book and internet culture that, oh, Marvel's trying to get rid of the X-Men because Fox owns them. But really, what's happened is just the quality of X-Men titles has dropped so far because there's so many, they're rushing so much, to create so many X-Men books that there's just nobody thinks of it as like Marvel trying. In people's minds, Marvel's just trying to destroy the brand, when really these same people that are complaining are probably the people buying all the books and pushing up the numbers and creating, the cycle continues.
Yeah. And that's one of those things that we come back to on several occasions. It's like people that buy things even when they're not enjoying them just totally fuck it up for the rest of us.
Right.
Like if people would just not buy bad books, then there wouldn't be as many of them. But we have tons of bad books, and a lot of people that read them admit that they're bad. It's crazy. The whole collecting thing, it's strange.
Well, and there is the other side to it, though, as well, that there are a lot of people that like a lot of that stuff.
Well, if they like it, that's fine.
So we can't just automatically say, like, all of the stuff at Marvel and DC that we think is bad is because of that. But I think that's a big part of it, But there is this other half where there's a whole lot of fandom that really just have very immature tastes. I mean, just frankly, it's a very young adult market, right?
Sure.
So especially at Marvel and DC, we see it the most because that's the highest profile. But really, we have the equivalent of, things, that aren't terrible. It's not straight up bad, like Twilight, right? Like young adult books that are appropriate, or Harry Potter for a younger audience, but there's also adults who read those things, and I understand it. It's a simple, easy read. It's kind of fun to just burn through it and go, okay, that was cool. But there's a large segment of like the male market that looks to comic books for that, and so we see a lot of that material. A lot of Jeff Johns' work, I think, is roughly equivalent to like Stephanie Meyer's or even the like pulpy novelists that release 10 novels every year, right? These not Stephen King, but that other guy I think is Dean Koontz.
Dean Koontz, yeah.
I think he's kind of the Dean Koontz of comic books, and there's a lot of guys like that are just pumping stuff out that sort of hits all the check boxes for an immature light read that you can just kind of burn through, and there's a big market for it. So we end up getting a lot of that stuff that drives us crazy because we have to like weed through it, right?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I can't say if somebody's like wrong for liking something. It's whatever you're into. That's what you're into, and it's important to maintain that. But at the same time, we can't neglect again the whole like collecting thing. Like even if it means that we would have 3 Batman titles instead of 4, I bet those 3 would be better quality.
Right.
Just saying.
Right. Yeah, and if we had 2, it'd probably be better than the 3. Right. If for no other reason, then they don't have to like go so far into the bullpen, right, to get all of that put out. And I also think that's part. There is some stuff behind the scenes. Let's talk about that fact that we like to think that it's like a perfect world. Like people imagine the creation of comic books as like just this pure entity of like a creator decides he wants to write this book, and then Marvel goes, good job, thanks for writing that great Iron Man book, you know what I mean? And like, let's make sure you're with a great artist, and so a lot of times from the outside, I think we look at it as fans and we complain about things that really fandom has no control over at all.
Sometimes writers and artists just don't work that well together. They don't like working together.
Sometimes an editor and a writer don't mesh well, even.
Right?
And that's hard to even understand from our perspective, right?
Yeah, sometimes even if they are in agreement, sometimes an editor can just totally wreck a title.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So I mean, there's just so many factors that go into it, and not to mention once we get into that editorial thing, then how much they care about like continuity, like suddenly matters, and like the universe, whatever matters, and where that editor in their mind sees this book, like if the editorial team tells Tom King like, look, you need to write Batman for these age ranges, and maturity level needs to be about here, and whatever. They give him like a recipe, and then he puts it together, and there is some nuance to putting it together.
Right, he gets to choose his spices, but
right at the end of the day, like they're telling him what to make, and he's saying like, okay,
you got to make a lemon cupcake. He can add a little chrysanthemum or whatever.
But he can't bring back a steak.
Right here. Exactly. And I think that's part of the reason why, especially with Marvel and DC, which, I mean, honestly, that's a huge part of the market, right? Like, we can't really talk about comic books and fandom without talking about Marvel and DC, because I think most of it happens there. When you get into Image...
Because they have the most, like, established characters. I mean, the creator-owned thing, it's like... Yeah, now several years in, we have some recognizable characters and stuff like that, but, I mean, most of them, not really.
Right.
I mean, there hasn't been like 17 different writers on Velvet.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And Invincible's just written by Robert Kirkman. It's not like something that moves around, or all of Millar's property is that way. It's all just Millar world, right? So the dynamics there work a little bit differently. And I think a lot of the creator-owned world is interesting because it's kind of a more distilled version of what's going on, right? Because obviously sales matter more because a lot of it is very tightly funded, right? The difference between selling 15,000 and 18,000 can make or break the guy and whether or not he can put out, issue 2.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So even there, we see even more. But at the same time, then we also can see a lot more influence from fandom, from like the internet and Twitter and things like that, because there's less editorial insight. So maybe we should talk about that side of things where like fans really do influence things outside of what their wallet.
Well, a little bit before that, I wanted to touch on, maybe it could be argued that one of the great things about comics is just that you get these characters through different people's perspectives, and you could do like a whole like research study just on like the evolution of like this one or this one or this one. You don't really get that with independent comics. So, I mean, to a degree, I would like to see them kind of shift some properties around and stuff sometimes. Like, I would like to see Jason Aaron write one of Millar's books for a while. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, it would be awesome. I agree. I think that's one of the strong points actually with Marvel and DC, and what drives even us towards them, right? And we tend to do mostly complaining about them, but when we do find something we really like, that's a big part of why we like it, right? Mm-hmm. Because of that trading of creators around on the character and seeing different people's vision of a character.
And you don't get that sort of, I mean, both of their universes are very vast, but there's less just oversaturation of characters.
Right.
I mean, I could off the top of my head name like a ton of like Marvel and DC characters, but like Image characters, I mean, it's like it really comes down to what I've read most recently, are the ones that stand out.
Right.
But okay, so on to the Twitter thing and all that. I think there's a bit of an acceptance that the people that do kind of those things are probably a vocal minority. Mm-hmm. And usually the things I see them bitching about are like so stupid that I have to think that writers don't take them that seriously, but I don't know if editors do or not.
Right. I also think it's important to think about the fact that the way comics get made means that most of the immediate complaining about things that happen are just, by the nature of how the medium is created, irrelevant, right? So let's talk about like an example, Captain America and being...
Nick Spencer.
Nick Spencer's Captain America, where all of a sudden he's Hydra, right? And a lot of people throw a fit and say, that's not my Captain America. It shouldn't be like that, right? And they want to return to before that occurs, right? But here's the thing. The way comics are created, he's already a couple issues into this story. That's, I guarantee by the time you read it, the next one's been submitted or close to done, right? Like the artist has spent at least some time doing the work. They're not going to pull it, and like start over. And a lot of times Nick Spencer's thinking 4 or 5 issues ahead. Mm-hmm. He's probably got outlines of what's happening. So a lot of the complaining about specific storylines is not only incorrect, in regards to like not really understanding the medium, but even more importantly, it probably has no effect on the story itself because the story's already written, or it's already got an outline that's way past where you're upset, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And to touch on like the not correct thing, I think a lot of people forget about that for some reason. It's just that another one's going to come out next month, man.
Right.
Like the issue you just read, that's not the end of everything. That's not how they chose to end Captain America is where you're at right now. Like, they're going to keep going probably after you're dead.
Right.
So there's a lot of shit still to come.
Right.
Just wait it out.
And there's always this whole thing about, characters need to change or else why are you still reading it? If the character doesn't change or do anything new that you don't expect, then why bother picking it up in the first place? It's just, you just go ahead and get the last arc. And if it's just going to do the same thing as this one, right?
Yeah, unless you're a collector and then you just have it.
And then you just buy them all.
You want to own it.
Right. But, from a fan perspective and how those relate to that is we see a lot of just empty, pointless complaining. But then there's also this broader sort of complaint that I think does have some impact, especially with Marvel, because Marvel's a Disney-owned company now, and Disney's pretty progressive in the first place, right? Disney's always had like the gay cruises and the Two Dad Day, right? Like all this kind of stuff. Disney's always been sort of progressive in terms of like its political bent. So it's not surprising that, a large enough complaint just from the populace in general has pushed Marvel, I think, towards a much more diverse roster, more diverse storytelling, more diverse creative input.
Creators.
Creators specifically, bringing in a lot more people of color, a lot more women into the industry. So I think it's clear that fandom does have some influence there, right?
That goes a little bit back to when we discussed that, though, and that, a lot of the complaints, like, from that, a lot of those sides, a lot of the complaints that we see just in general usually aren't from people that have any dog in the fight, so to speak. It's just like neutral third parties who decide to like care about this week.
Right.
Which is absurd. But changes have been made because of it. We decided all in all like it was for the best. So.
Right. Yeah. Well. Yeah. I think overall it's silly to complain that there would be more diversity in storytelling. Yeah. Right. More diverse characters, more diverse creative teams is going to lead to more interesting stuff to read just straight away.
Sure. And given that they took a lot of chances and some of them didn't, pan out, like the Black Panther, Ta-Nehisi Coates, is a perfect example of like it's just not a good story.
Right.
Or like, Jane Foster Thor, like there's nothing you can do about the fact that it's not a good story.
Right.
But I think, as a business based around this creative endeavor, like if you're not taking chances on stuff, then like what are you even doing?
Well, but then the counterpoint,
you're just running DC.
Well, that's the thing. Like the counterpoint is DC and Rebirth, right? So if the contention is that PC SJW types are have this big impact on the industry, then how did DC Rebirth come about?
Backlash.
Because it could be. Is that the case? Is it really backlash from that? Like, is it a reaction to Marvel and what people complained about Marvel? So DC is sort of where people that don't like diversity are now going to?
It could be some of that. I can also see that DC kind of tried the same thing, but they were just like really bad at it. Like they just tried to take characters that were already established and completely change them and stuff.
Right.
And of course, fanboys are going to lose their shit about that, because it's like, this character is like this person. Why would you change that character? So then sort of in the response to their own failure, they created this like backlash kind of mold for themselves where it's like, okay, if you're pissed off about our old stuff, we got something for you. If you're pissed off about, Marvel's new stuff, we got something for you. So
Right. Right,
Like
but I find it interesting. So you think that the DC focused more on the response from their core readership? Is that kind of what's happened here, to where, the core fanboyish kind of reader has decided that they want their white male protagonist back with their sort of straight line A to B storytelling?
Yeah, it's sort of. I mean, I really want to emphasize that whole, like, they dipped their foot in the water and it was a little bit cold and they jumped like 10 feet back.
Right.
Is the way that it seems.
Right. So do you think that has mostly to do with sales? Because DC was dropping pretty badly in sales. So are we coming back to this idea that it's really sales is what makes the determining factor on where these companies go? Because they've gone in very different directions.
Sure.
Right?
Probably. Anytime you take a different direction, I mean, with sales, you're just kind of hoping. I mean, at this point, the evidence points to that it's working out for them. But again, we're coming back to that point that at our local comic shop, there's a whole wall of Rebirth titles that are just stacked deep. So,
50 deep or more.
Right. So, the comic shops are buying a lot, but that doesn't mean that people are buying them and reading them and stuff. So, I mean, it's artificial. It's printing more money to lower your debt.
Right. Ultimately, I guess what I'm trying to get at, what do you think the percentage of influence is? Let's look at it that way. Between like how you spend your money, right? And how people in general spend their money versus what people say on Reddit and Twitter and Facebook that ultimately affects the comic book industry and the things that we read in the top couple hundred comics that come out.
Maybe 70-30. Sales being the 70.
That's higher on the 30 than I would say. I would put it at like 90-10.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
And that's
probably more realistic.
I think pretty much the only thing that matters, especially to the large publishers like Valiant, Marvel, Image, DC, even Dark Horse and Boom, and is sales. If it sells, they're going to do it. And if it doesn't, they're going to stop. Right? If they think that something they do is going to add to sales, then that's when they will give it a try. But it's not going to keep it going, right? The Ironheart, Riri Williams, the new Iron Man, right? If she doesn't sell, it'll stop. They won't keep making it. They'll do one arc of it. It'll be over, and they'll come up with a way to bring Tony Stark back. If it sells really well, she's the new Iron Man.
Right.
That's the way it works.
And I think recently they both made it clear that they're not really concerned with like legacy titles. Something that 10 years down the road they can say, well, look, what we've done here. Which in the past they have been. I mean, there are very famous trades from back in the day. They don't really give a shit about that now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe not. They do seem to be taking some chances in that regards on both sides, Marvel and DC, and certainly with Image is hard to compare because it's just all creator owned. So they, it's not like there's some person on high making decisions.
Sure. If the creator wants a legacy sort of kind of title, then they're going to make one, and that's it.
Right. And I think all Image titles, I would assume the creator is hoping to do that, right? They want something that's going to last. But DC is doing the Young Animal thing. They're going to try the Wildstorm thing. So I think they're giving it a shot of trying to do some interesting longer-term stuff that might be, have some critical appeal to them. And clearly Marvel... Is it
that, or is it that they're trying to get their market share back from Image?
Yeah, it's hard to say. And they also have Vertigo, which has some good stuff.
Is there still Vertigo?
Well, yeah, Sheriff of Babylon's still coming out, right?
That's true, yeah.
Vertigo is just now the non-DC universe portion of things, the non-superhero storytelling. And they've had a lot of great stuff on there, but really the catalyst for change is often, I think, fandom and things that people seem to overwhelmingly want to see happen, but being the nature of the industry, if it doesn't sell, it'll just change back. So if you don't like something that people are asking for and it bothers you when you see it, well, if you don't buy it and then nobody else buys it, it'll be back. So like you don't need, you know what I mean? You don't need to worry about it. And if enough people are buying it and liking it, it probably needs to exist. you know?
Sure.
So for me, I think that's where it comes down to with fandom is you get the catalysts on what people want, and then cells are what decide what sticks around.
Probably. So buy good shit. Don't even buy mediocre shit.
Drop things
Just buy good shit.
mercilessly.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We really do try. If we don't enjoy it, 2 issues, you know, first issue, if we didn't enjoy it, maybe it's a bad issue. Second issue, we don't enjoy it in a row.
See you later.
Out of here, right? We'll get something else. There's too many great comics being made to waste your time just reading something that you kind of like or that might get better later. You can always buy it and trade later if it gets better, right?
Right.
Like, you don't need the single issues. Quit screwing everybody over by buying garbage that you don't absolutely love. That's the moral.
You have no obligation to these fucking characters. They're not real people.
They're not real. Yeah. They don't
Even
exist.
if they were, they wouldn't fucking know who you are.
Yeah.
You know?
And if you just...
Creators don't fucking know who you are.
If you just skip it, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, because you didn't read it. So it didn't happen. You can just get back on when something else that is cool happens.
Speaking of, thank God they didn't make like a second or a third Matrix movie. Because like they would have been like so bad.
It would have been terrible.
You know? They were so smart to just cut it off at one.
At the one.
See you later.
Yeah. Come
Facebook,
back.
Twitter.
Come back later on for more stuff. You know. Yeah. There's always more.